Good morning. No, that way I will go back to Egypt if you keep doing that. Good morning. Very good to see you. I'm happy you came back. I mean, I really appreciate that. We will continue with our discussion from yesterday. And just one suggestion and request. As much as possible, if you have a question and you think it can wait till the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes of discussion, I would really appreciate it. And that will just help me to keep going with the different points I want to make. But if it's really urgent and it has to be addressed right away, then of course, please let me know. I mean, raise your hand, and I will do my best to address it right away. I sent yesterday a couple of documents on definitions of culture. I hope everyone received it, because I have like a list of all of you's names. If anyone did not, let me know. And then Saji, you will going to send me that word. I kept looking. It disappeared? All right, that's okay. Whenever you find it, I'm more than happy to deal with it, okay? Good. So what we will do today is we want to continue. We started yesterday getting into some of those fundamentals of the field. So we need to switch to one of the files from yesterday. We spoke yesterday about the multidisciplinarity, and I think we understood, yes, and just to go up a little bit. Yeah, one more. One more, yep, perfecto. And we spoke about culture appropriate. I gave you the definition of cultures. I would say the common thread between all the definitions of culture is that it is a shared sense of understanding of values and the behaviors and I would say also what constitutes what's right and what's wrong and what's good, what's bad. And again, everyone is made of a variety of value systems and cultures, but it is with this kind of wide understanding that you can understand, okay, I can see why somebody thinks that a certain behavior is acceptable, not acceptable. It is an influence of culture for sure. The third one we have is collaborative participatory processes. Yes, I think that we do have a direction in this field of peace and conflict studies to encourage approaches to resolving conflicts that are participatory, that are based on collaborating between people. Versus what? Versus approaches that are coming like upper hand coming and saying, this is how we do things. Think of a judge. You go to a court and the judge will say, this is how we're gonna rule on this. Or somebody powerful in a conflict, and he or she dictate what happens in the conflict or the outcome. We want more entities, all the way from individuals to organizations to nation states and so on, communities, to learn how to work collaboratively and how to work in a participatory way to find positive solutions, mutually agreeable solutions for everyone. I would say that this is definitely the tendency that we try to get more people to understand that that's how we work. And this is what distinguishes us also from studying law. When you study in a law school, you are pretty much trained to understand how to operate in a court system. And a court system assumes there is a law and there is somebody who will come and enforce the law. The law means I have a conflict with you, we're going to go to the judge will say, you take this, you don't take that. We think that, of course, there are conflicts you have to deal with in a court system, and you're going to have a state power or authority to determine, especially criminal issues, major violations, and so on. But whenever we talk about conflict of interest between groups or organizations or people, then it makes sense to think that we need to get more people to learn how to talk with each other and how to communicate with each other so that they can best convey what is important for them, and to listen to the other and to also understand what is important for them, and then find a way to solve their problem. Sounds ideal, sounds like, okay, sounds nice, but is it really possible on the ground? Is it possible with cultural differences, the notion of gender, notions of power, notions of xenophobia, and so on? Of course, it's complicated. And that's why you're studying here, and people are studying about this field in a deeper level with a multidisciplinary approach. And then I will say also there is something else I want to say about participatory processes. It's not just about how we solve conflict. It is also how we learn and study about conflict. Yesterday, I mentioned all of you here are experts already. Because I saw, actually, I was happy walking around in the seminars yesterday and to see people are sharing experiences and sharing from what they have seen and what they have learned, and we really would like more of this. And you will appreciate to see that, wow, I never thought of a conflict like this when you hear another classmate sharing a certain experience. I learned so much from my working here, especially at UPeace and worldwide, by listening to people, by listening to their stories. You cannot do that if you don't have a participatory learning mode, which is an element of what we call peace education. Actually, I have one story that's stuck in my mind for the last 10 years being here. When I was at UPeace, we would do the class like this, and then I was also one of the facilitators like my colleagues here in one of the sessions. And I remember in one session, we had my own 22 students, and we were talking one day about nonviolence. That was the topic of the class or the seminar. And you can imagine, I mean, if I talk about nonviolence to this group of people coming to UPeace, and all the students were just talking about great examples of, yes, of course, nonviolence works. Of course, you can use always methods of nonviolent approaches to conflict, and they are talking about the great examples of Gandhi, of Martin Luther King, and so many other examples. It was going very well. I mean, and they're just discussing, and I thought, okay, that's what I expect from a group like this. Everything is going very well. And then there was this young woman in the group. She was about maybe 23 at that time. And she raised her hand, shyly. And then she said, I really appreciate all that you're saying about nonviolence and that you can solve all problems with nonviolence. But I also would like to share with you that when I was 14 years old, I was sexually assaulted by 2 men. And in retrospect, I wish at that time I used violence to stop this from happening to me. You realize how quiet this room is? You can hear a pin drop. Every time I share that story in the world, I get that silence. Because I realize that this is such a deep issue for many people. And it alerts us to question even our very idealistic assumptions. When can I use force? When do I protect myself? When I become pacifist, not pacifist? Where does this fit with the notion of nonviolence? It is not a black and white. It is not like there is a violent way to deal with conflict and non-violent way to deal with conflict. Unfortunately, there is a big gray area, and we need to find a way to protect individuals and communities against violence that is inflicted on them. I use that story only to show you that, I mean, the depth of it. I still remember it, and I know that everyone in that classroom still remembers that story from that young woman. By the way, I didn't finish. After she said that, she started to cry, just weeping. And the room was silent like this for 2-3 minutes. Nobody could open their mouths for 2-3 minutes. I think everyone was reflecting on that, reflecting in their own personal story, reflecting on what they have seen and have known. And seeing that among them there is this brave young woman who is able to open up and share her own experience with her own emotion coming out. I'm not saying that I expect everyone to come out of the closet and to share stories that are so painful in your life, but I am suggesting that the opportunity for learning on a very deep level about experiences that really can bring to life in our seminars, in our classroom, what conflict is, beyond the theoretical. That's what makes that study of peace and conflict very powerful and very relevant to us as human beings. So that participatory dimension for me is not just about how to solve conflicts in a participatory way, but it is how to study and learn together about peace and conflict. Adjustable interventions, and that means that what we want to have almost like the skill of knowing when and how to intervene in different situations. You need to know, is it the right time to talk about what we refer to as peacekeeping, or is it the right time for peacemaking or peace building or other approaches? Who are the right ones to come in the conflict to do something and who are not? That's why analysis is critical, because this is what will help us to determine what are proper interventions, and also be aware that a proper intervention at a certain moment may be appropriate for that moment. But if things change again on the ground, like happens often in conflicts, then I need to be aware of such changes and to adjust my intervention accordingly. And we will do more of this when we talk about interventions. And number 5, empowerment. I mentioned feminism and the importance of feminism for the field of peace and conflict studies. And I believe that feminism, and maybe that's how I see feminism actually, feminism is not just about empowering women and about deconstructing the injustice against women. Maybe it started like that. But I think it inspired everybody to think of injustice, period. Injustice to any group of people, whether based on sex, based on gender, based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or any of the forms of injustice that have persisted in different societies. How can we undo this? How can we develop the proper interventions that will ensure that we will empower somebody who is otherwise weakened by social class, by, as I mentioned, or any of those other factors? And how can we make sure that when they are in a conflict situation with somebody powerful, that they are not in a disadvantage because of the stigma or because of what the culture or society has imposed on them as you are below here and you just need to listen to what the powerful is telling you. We have a mission here. I cannot say that we are always neutral and unbiased. No, we are probably biased towards empowering the weak, no matter who the weak is. And I believe that conceptually, theoretically, that came from the feminist influence on this field from the 50s and the 60s. And you see this notion coming in all your programs, whether you're studying peace education, environment, human rights, international peace studies, any of the programs here. I think you're going to find that that notion of empowerment is just running through everything. And I am sure that you will realize that, yes, how can we solve problems if we are maintaining a power imbalance between groups and people? And 6 is the interactive participation. Maybe that's what I jumped on when I spoke about the story of the young woman. That we want that learning to be in this kind of interactive way based on that you learn from your experience, and also to make sure that when you learn something here, it is not about just so I can write a good paper and get my degree. That's definitely you need to do that. But we want you to really know how to deal with conflict in real life and how to achieve peace and advance peace in real life. And that's not going to happen if we just sit here and lecture you all the time. But it is about being interactive, being participatory in our learning style. Those are, for me, are fundamentals. I call them fundamentals because, again, probably you are not going to hear the same thing when you go to your programs, but think about it when you reflect on what is happening in your program. You're going to realize that those 6 are happening in the way that you are getting your education here. Next one, next page. From here, I want to talk about, Mesmo, senor. Mesmo, yeah, down. Okay. One more. Okay, uno más. Perfecto. Those are what I call not fundamentals necessarily, but I call them characteristics of conflict in general that we need to be aware of. And I'm going to give you in a second some definitions of conflict. They are in your reading of C.R. Cipabio. So, as you saw yesterday with the peace definitions, we are not about what is the right definition. That's important if you are studying law. In the legal field, oh my goodness, you got to be very careful with every word and every letter, what it means. And you have to have one definition, no other definitions for every issue. But when we are talking about peace and conflict, I'm more comfortable with the notion of perspectives and to be able to combine from different definitions and find what is good here and what's good there. The same for conflict. But for those characteristics, the first one, already there's some argument about it from yesterday, but please, let's keep it for the discussion time and also for your seminar. Recognition that conflicts are inevitable. Conflicts will always happen. Yes, somebody can say that, yeah, well, but we should strive to get to a point where there's no conflict. Well, probably humanity will reach that point. I actually am not somebody who believes that. I think that as long as we are humans the way we are now, and the way we have existed forever, then we will always have forms of conflict emerging between people for different reasons. So we should maybe reduce the bar a little bit. We should not strive to say that, oh, we're going to work hard. Our goal at UPeace is to eliminate conflict. I think every time you hear the word that somebody wants to eliminate conflict, if it were me, I would say, oh, good luck. I would say be more realistic and accept that I'm going to eliminate maybe the violent symptoms or manifestations of conflict. Yes, I can work with somebody on that. We will find ways to reduce the tension in conflict, to reduce the negative aspects, the destructive elements of conflict. But we are not going to totally eliminate conflict. And this is important conceptually because you don't want to set the standard high for people. I mean, if you work with organizations, communities, and they have a conflict, and you go and help them to resolve this conflict, if you raise the expectation among people that now you really know how to solve your conflict and you did solve it, we don't want to see conflicts ever again. Now imagine what will happen when this community naturally will have to fall into conflict one more time. And if they don't have the right skills and equipment to solve this conflict, then the amount of tension that may be generated because they fell again in conflict may become even worse than the first time. You don't want to raise that expectation for communities, for individuals, for nations. Instead, you want to do two things. Number one, to try to solve that immediate conflict that's happening between them. And number two is to prepare them to know how to deal with future conflicts in a constructive way. Knowing that more conflicts will happen. It is not going to stop. But what we want to do is to find better ways to deal with conflicts as they emerge, which I refer to in a little bit different from how you read in the book by Ramsbotham. I see prevention of conflict as actually the ultimate goal. They see it as a preparatory step. But I see that, no, I want to prepare people not only how to solve an immediate problem happen between them, but that on the long term, they know how to prevent conflicts from becoming violent or destructive or negative. They will happen. And I'll give examples about that when I come to the session on interventions. Conflict and peace apply to various levels. I think we are aware of this now. I don't need to repeat it. While conflict can be destructive and harmful, peaceful approaches can make it positively transformative. Yes, there is always a chance, no matter how terrible a conflict is, that you can turn it into something positive. And maybe it's a very quick example here. Okay, do you have French in the room? Somebody French. Okay, do you have a German? Yeah, where is Lena? Yeah, I know. Two of them. Oh my goodness. All right, okay, so we'll do this. It's a little bit dramatic, but so you are French and you are German. And let's, huh? Well, yeah, we'll go back to 1943, okay? Yeah, you got it, yeah, good prediction, yeah. So we are now in 1943, all right? Yeah, ooh, yeah. And I am a fortune teller, all right? And I happen to see the two of you. And I look at my glass ball or whatever it is and say, after 50 years, it seems like there will be no border between you. There's no military between the two countries. You're going to have even the same currency. You're going to be able to go and work in each country. You have no visa. You can cross the border and be almost like one country. If I had said this to you in 1943, what would you have said to me at that time? Go ahead, just say what you'd have said. Seriously, honestly.
Never.
That's never possible. That's the most polite way of saying, I heard, yeah. What would you have said? Give me my money back, yeah. You don't know what you're talking about. But guess what? It did happen. It did transform in a positive way. Not only for France and Germany, but for the entire Europe. Does this mean that and of course, number one, it did not happen by accident. Not because they are just nice people, but it is because they went systemically and knowing there is difficulty and challenges and day in and day out working on deeper issues in the societies of education, of media, of economics, and so on, to solve the big issue of peace between them and to advance peace and transform the relationship between them. Not that they no longer have conflicts. They do have conflicts. I mean, I remember like when Greece fell into this economic situation, financial situation a few years ago. I imagine if that was 100 years ago, and Greece had borrowed this money from Germany and other countries, what do you think would have happened? They would have went and occupied it and just made sure to suck every economic thing they have to get their money back. But now they have mechanisms for how to deal with an emerging conflict. And for me, that's what I'm talking about of conflict prevention. Conflict will happen, but they know now how to deal with it in a constructive way. Not always I'm going to have to come and hit you and beat you and destroy you because I'm stronger. So for me, that's a perfect example when you want to think of, okay, what is a good example of a conflict that transforms it positively, or when we talk about peace building or conflict transformation, I think the European Union, with, of course, I mean, it's not perfect, but what an example. Think of 1943 or 42, and think of 2018. Wow, what a change. And not every conflict ended up changing like this. Some conflicts, of course, are getting worse, and they are still deteriorating. Our job is what? Is to learn, and that will come, our job is to learn how to replicate what works well in certain situations and what made it work. Can we find elements that are transferable to other situations? Or how can we learn what will work in another situation to make sure that it transforms positively? And that's why you are learning on a deeper level and across the board so that you can have this learning and see how to apply it to different settings. Number 4, conflict may be manifest or latent. Yes, I mean, I know there is a conflict when I see manifestation of especially violence. What's your name, sir?
Diego.
Diego. Okay, so can you stand up, Diego? All right, come here, Diego, don't worry. So if Diego and I have a conflict and you see me punching Diego and he's punching me, you will know that there is a conflict between us. Right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. My hero, thank you. Yeah. But, so go ahead, punch, but don't punch. I mean, just like that. Yeah. So this is manifest conflict, right? But, okay. But if for example, Diego, he has questions in the question and answer session, okay? And he is really anxious, and he keeps raising his hand. And every time he raises his hand, I'm just ignoring the heck out of him, and I am choosing other people. Maybe many people will not realize it, will not see that there is a conflict, but he will probably realize what? If every time you raise your hand, I'm not asking you to, giving you the floor. Ignoring you, yeah. So something is wrong, right? There is something wrong, because I wouldn't ignore you if everything is nice. That means that there is something happening that's not good, but it's not manifested enough yet. But does this mean then ignore it until Diego starts to stand up and scream at me, or then he comes here and I punch him? And then we say, oh, okay, now there is conflict, let's work on it. Or does it make more sense to detect it when it's still latent, when it's still we cannot see the manifestation, and then do something early on about it before it becomes violent? So that's why it is important when you do your analysis, don't only look at the symptoms that are negative, but look also at what is under the surface that you can detect as may be the reason why things are getting worse. Thank you, Diego. Said for now, I may call you again. Okay. Number 5, and I would say that this is kind of the sum of my 61 years of living. This number 5, I came up with this one. No one wakes up in the morning thinking that he or she is the bad guy. No one. In a conflict. Imagine it. I mean, do you think you ever woke up in the morning, or you know anyone who woke up in the morning and say, oh, wow, this is a great day to be evil? Yeah, we don't do that, right? But here is the irony. Somebody is waking up in the morning, putting an explosive belt around themselves, knowing very well that they're going to walk into a room full of civilians, unarmed, and once they get in, they're going to blow up themselves and kill everyone in the room. Did this one think in the morning it's a good day to be evil? The irony is no. The irony is such a person is convinced that they are doing the right thing. Even when they are doing this, they think that they are retaliating against what happened to them, to happen to their people, their nations, their religions, their ethnicity, whatever it is. And that is a tit for tat. They are killing our people. We are killing their people. We are using our way of killing them just like they are killing us. What I want to say, I'm not justifying for anybody to do any violence, but what I want to say is, if we want to be serious about conflict and resolving conflict, we must understand where the other person comes from. Not to dismiss them. Like, for example, if I am not calling on Diego whenever he raises his hand, and I think often people, what will they do is they will dismiss you by saying, oh, he's just an idiot. He is just somebody who is racist against, I assume you're Latino? Yep. Against Latinos. Or whatever it is. I mean, they will find something to dismiss you and to demonize you, or even to dehumanize you. But the challenge is always, can I try to understand what is justifying for you this action? How can you wake up in the morning thinking that what you're doing is okay, or right, or justified? And imagine also that if I am in a conflict, I always have the tendency to convince myself I am the good guy, and the other one is the bad guy. Diego, come up again. Diego, I mean, whoever sits in the front line, front row is like my, becomes, okay. So imagine like, say that you got up and you say, I just want to understand why you are not calling on me whenever I raise your hand, whenever I raise my hand, okay? And, but let's make it more on an equal level. I mean, I'm not the professor, the old guy, the fat. I mean, no. I mean, just like we are kind of like equal, all right? I'm fat? Okay, all right. Just kidding, all right. Okay. Let's say whatever situation we got into, all right? And then I just punched you in the face. When I punch you in the face, again, I am not punching you because, oh, I want to be a bad guy. No, I have a reason to think or to believe that he deserves to be punched in the face. I am protecting myself. That can be a reason. He needs to learn a lesson. Whatever justification I have for why I punched him in the face. So from my perspective, I am doing something very justified. And I punch you. If we are equal, and I punched you, and you have no understanding why the heck I punched you, or even worse, if you have a already perceived notion that I am just an evil bad guy, what will you do?
Probably punch back.
Probably punch back. Very good. Go ahead. Yeah. So I punched him. He punched me back. Now let's think of that punching back. What will happen when he punches me back? Now, do I see it as, because for you it is just tit for tat, right? So you feel like you punch me, so I have to protect myself by punching you, so that I can make sure that you know that there's a cost for hitting me. There is a good logic for him why he's doing that. But from my perspective, when he punch, I don't see my punching as unjustified, right? I see it as I had the right to do it. But when he punches me back, I see it as confirmation that he's really deserving of another bigger punch. So instead of hitting him with my hand like I did the first time, now I'm going to take this and boom, on his head. And the problem is, he will see it also from his perspective, and he will see that, okay, yeah. Or he will bring Hero with him, and the two of them will come and hit me. Right? Thank you, Diego, for now. We'll bring you back. We must understand that element of conflict. Look at nation states, how they deal with this issue, and they use their media, and how they will frame the other as the terrible. It serves a purpose. I'll talk more about it in the conflict analysis. But I want to leave you with it and let you think about it. Reflect on it in your own life. And reflect on how often we have seen people do that, including ourselves. I mean, if you ask me, am I doing that? Yeah, of course, I always justify for myself, and I then have to catch myself. Maybe that's what I learned over the years. I got to stop and think, where is the person the other one is coming from? When I see the media portraying one group as the good, honest, angelic side, and the other one is the demon, I say, I'm not going to buy this. I need to see the story from both sides. I need to understand how the other one is seeing it. If we don't make this effort early on, we cannot get to serious resolution or transformation of conflict. And then number 6, that's Gandhi actually. And Gandhi said, there is no road to peace, peace is the road. And that means what? It means that instead of thinking of peace as if it is one of those trees and one of them is an apple tree and peace is an apple hanging up there on a tree, and our job is just to find a way to catch that apple, and then when we get it we say, got peace, I have peace in my hand here. As a matter of fact, no. Gandhi says that it's not about catching that apple on the tree. It is about how you go about it. How are you going to achieve peace? Are you going to use violence? Are you going to walk over groups of people? Are you going to exploit people to get the tree and to get the coffee or to get whatever it is? And then you say, we are now fine, we have money, we are rich, and we got the coffee production. Like, no. It is about how you ensure that all the steps you are taking are peaceful in order to reach peace. Sounds also very idealistic, but that's what I leave it for your programs for the whole year to discuss and to elaborate on and to see what does this really mean and how do we reflect this in real life and can it really work. And again, I want to say that if you ask me, does it work? I would say with one reservation, you have to protect yourself. There is nothing like just leave yourself open to people attacking you, and that's where we draw the line. But how I go about trying to find peace with another group, organization, nation, individual, then yes, there are always choices of using things that are hostile, and there are also always choices of using things that are considerate of how I will watch everything I do and say to make sure that I am conveying a message of peace to the other side, and hopefully it will click with them. Will it always click? Not necessarily. Will they see it as weakness? Probably. Does this mean let's stop and resort to violence? Not necessarily. But again, that's why you are here at UPeace, and you will continue to think of those questions for the whole year. This is about those characteristics. And now I would like to move us to, now let me just give you the three conflict definitions that we have. Now we turn that new file I gave you, the CRC PABI one. Yeah, go down. More. Yep. Go. Okay, go. Okay, okay, yeah, that's it, perfect. Here we have 4 definitions of conflict that I thought we can look at, with conflict being a fight. And go down a little bit more. Down. Here we go. This is one, yeah. Those are more of the literature definitions of conflict. The first one was a set of like the linguistic one, but here is more how we think about it from the field of conflict resolution. And again, I leave it to you. I'm not saying choose one over the other. I'm saying I want you to look at all of them, see what are the common threads. You can disagree with some, you can agree. But I think what is common among all of them, that there are always entities, 2 or more, realizing that they cannot achieve their objectives at the same time, or the situation around them is not allowing this, and therefore they have to struggle to achieve their goal. Some people disagree about the struggle is a part of the conflict, especially when we think of manifest conflict versus latent conflict. But in all cases, there are entities having incompatible goals, trying to achieve them, somebody's interfering with them. The situation as a whole is not allowing for this. And that's why we have a conflict. And I leave it to you to pull out of those definitions what works and how to understand it. But that will lead me to the part of this class where I want to get into the conflict analysis, is how to think of conflict systematically and how to understand the different pieces and apply it to different levels of conflict. So we want to go down now, Gerardo, to the chart. You know the chart, the CRC PABI chart with colors? Down. Keep going. Mass. Okay. Proxima page. Here we are. And this one you want to make small so we can see it. See my Spanish? Okay. So the way I'm going to use this model is, as you've seen, is called CRC PABI. It is not like the model. I mean, there are a bunch of models, but for me, that's kind of, I feel like this is more comprehensive compared to many of the other models that are developed in the literature, for example, to assess stakeholders or parties, or to assess the conflict escalation, or to assess the timeline in a conflict. There are so many different analytical pieces that are, or the iceberg, or the tree of conflict. There are excellent methods of analysis, but in my opinion, each of them, and it's in your reading, in the CR-CPABio reading, each of them is concerned with one of the pieces within CR-CPABio. But I always felt there was a need for something that encompasses the whole story. So that's why I've been using this model, and as you can see, that the name is CR-CPABio. Can anyone quickly tell me what the letter C stands for? Conflict? Context, yes. The C with the red is for the context, and the R and CPABio are the 8 elements, the 8 essential elements in conflict. The argument in this model is what? Any conflict in the world, I don't care if it is between individuals, families, or between nation states, or whatever it is, must have the blue 8 elements. There are always sources of conflict. There are always interests, always positions people have in a conflict. And there are parties to the conflict, and they have attitudes and feelings that are reflected in behavior. And then eventually there's some form of intervention to try to solve this problem. And there is some outcome or a stage that the conflict reaches. All conflicts go through a cycle like this, or they have those elements. However, no conflict exists in a vacuum. A conflict must exist within a context. The context is more of the macro level issues that influence what is happening to us. Culture, we already spoke about it yesterday. Yeah, what makes somebody think that shaking head like this is offensive when somebody thinks that it is okay and it means I am agreeing? What will make somebody think that this is totally a no and I cannot accept it, and for somebody else, what is the problem? I must understand culture. I must understand how culture and other factors in defining gender roles. How does this influence power dynamics in a conflict? How does geography or history between groups has a role to play in shaping their attitudes? How does ethnicity of certain groups play the role in how the conflict intensifies or not? If I don't understand this background information and how it influences those 8, that would be an incomplete understanding. In addition, often conflicts happen between parties who have some form of a relationship with each other. Yes, sometimes conflict may happen between people who never met each other, or such as, I remember one time I was driving a car, and this guy hit me. And so I stopped, and I kind of cornered his car so he couldn't leave. And I was calling the insurance and the police and all the stuff. The guy, apparently, number 1, he was drunk. Number 2, he apparently had no insurance or license. So he managed to just zoom with his car, almost hit me. And of course, I reported to the police, went to court. I had a conflict with this guy when I never met him in my life. But how often this is the case? I don't think that this is the majority of conflicts. The majority of conflicts are happening between individuals, organizations, communities, groups of people, nations, who have some form of a relationship, and within that relationship, things start to get complicated. Even when you have a soldier on one side of an army fighting a soldier on the other side, those soldiers don't know each other, but they are making sure to kill each other. But they are representatives of nation states or armies that are in conflict because of the relationship between their states. So they are just agents, proxy for this fighting. So understanding the relationship itself with its own 3 elements, the power, and we'll get into this, the bond, what is connecting people together, and the patterns that exist in the relationship, patterns of being peaceful, being violent, being whatever, and understanding those 3 pieces will help us. And I will say that as I'm going to explain this model, you'll appreciate multidisciplinarity. You're going to see how we are sometimes drawing on sociology, psychology, cultural studies, communication, international relations, even social work and therapy. You'll see that everything is fitting into here. And for me, this is how we can truly appreciate the depth of understanding conflict. And for me to also demonstrate how this model can be used for different levels of conflict, I am going to actually use two conflicts to do the analysis with. One is an international level conflict, and one is a very interpersonal level conflict. And we'll try, as we go through this model, to see how does it work to understand both of them. Anybody needs this? Okay. Because in a second, I'm going to show you my skills in drawing. Okay, we'll see. So the first conflict we're going to do will be, as I said, an international one. And the second one will be an interpersonal one. For the international one, in the world map, oops. What is this? I'm telling you, my drawing is really getting better by... I told you. How did they figure that that was India? It wasn't anything else. Could have been anything. But it is the drawing. It is the skill. Now, what? Yeah, that's not a conflict. I agree, actually. I fully agree. Because you want to see the quality of the drawing, right? Yeah, you are so impressed that, yeah, thank you. I take this as a compliment. Okay. So this is India. Now, I don't know if you remember yesterday, did I mention my wife was from where? Anybody remember? Bangladesh. Okay, good. So actually, I met her exactly 20 years ago. Actually, like in a few days, we'll celebrate our 20th anniversary. Yeah. And oh, it's like the Oprah Winfrey now. Oh. Now, so when I met her, I remember we were actually in a human rights meeting, stuff like that, and we sat at a table for dinner. We were in the same table. I never met her before in my life, and I thought, oh my God, this woman looks so beautiful. And at the same time, when I sat to talk with her, I thought, whoa, impressive, intellectually, and it's like, my goodness, she has the whole package. And then so I was just, yeah. So I asked her where she was from, and she said she was from Bangladesh. Okay? So I remember that day I just went back home, very like, oh my God, this is so good, who knows what. And then I remember like standing in front of a map one day. So I wanted to look and just, okay, let me see Bangladesh exactly, how big, small, whatever. So now I am old enough to remember that Bangladesh used to be called, until 71, something else. East Pakistan. Right. So that means that there was actually a West Pakistan and then East Pakistan. And at that time, that was not surprising. For example, but that's not a very good drawing, but not like the India one, but let's assume that this is Germany. But it's not exactly, not as precise, but let's say that at one point, Germany was divided something like that, right? And that was called what? East Germany, right? And that was West Germany, right? On the very other side here, we still have this, and of course many of you are here, but again, don't hold me to the accuracy. There is what? This is what? Huh? Korea. Huh? Korea Peninsula. See, yeah. You didn't know? That's your country. Okay. And until today, unfortunately, I mean, it is, again, divided somewhat like that, right? And this is South Korea, right? And this is North Korea. Got it? Okay. Now, I know very well where Pakistan is today, right? Because, like, this is here where we're like Egypt and all those countries and the oil and all the stuff, right? And Iraq and blah, blah, blah. And then you have here, like, Iran, right? And then you have Afghanistan, not exactly, right? And then here you have something that is kind of like the current Pakistan, right? Current Pakistan. Okay. Now, knowing that there was East and West Germany like that, there is North and South Korea, right? And I know that at one point, Pakistan was divided into East and West, right? So, and they were part of one state. I mean, that's kind of like federal. It's almost like, yeah, like the United States, different than the federation. So, where do you think, and those who know for sure don't answer. But those who want to make a good guess, where do you think East Pakistan is versus what is now West Pakistan? So, like here, something like that? Okay, well, good guess, okay. Or maybe a little bit here? Something like that? West, because that's West. Remember, this is East Pakistan. That was, I'm sorry, this is West Pakistan. So the other one was East Pakistan, right? So it makes sense that it should be here, right? But just stop it. I mean, don't ruin this like yesterday when I said Xerox and it didn't work. I mean, you cannot ruin all my exercises, guys. I mean, okay. So, and that's, so actually I know geography fairly well. I know history. I know that there was East-West Pakistan. So, and East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So I am looking for Bangladesh to be here, somewhere east of what is now Pakistan. I couldn't find it. I find Afghanistan, I find Tajikistan, I find even China hanging out up here. I mean, it's like, where is that Bangladesh? And to my shock, look at the Indians, like goes other side, goes out. Yeah, that was my surprise that actually Bangladesh was here. That was East Pakistan. It was on the whole other side of India. And so what happened? I mean, those actually were part of the larger India for the longest time, especially under the British colonization. But as the British were leaving in 1947, there was tension between the Muslims and the Hindus. The Hindus are the majority in India. The Muslims are a minority who live or have a majority of population in some spots, not everywhere. So the Muslims said, we don't want to live with the Indians or the Hindus because we're going to be a minority, and without the balance that the British had established, they will take over us, they will abuse the heck out of us, we'll have no chance of having a representation in the government because we are a minority, we cannot live together, we want to separate. We want our own country in the areas where we have majority of population. Gandhi tried hard for this not to happen. Many people tried hard to keep India united, but unfortunately it did not work. At the end, they agreed that, all right, we're going to have to divide the country as the British leave in 1947, and we're going to have this here, you have a majority of Muslims in this part of India. That used to be called the Sindh and other places, and Punjab and so on. Yeah, and here also in the Bengal part of this, we will have, that has majority Muslims here. Although there are more Bengals here, but that's part of, there are more Hindus. But this is the Muslim Bengals here. And those are the Muslims of different other ethnic groups, which will come later to be important. So they decided because we are Muslims, so the one identity that seemed to hold them together was the fact that they both are Muslims. So they decided that, well, Islam, being the religion that unites us, should be good enough to hold us, and we will make Pakistan great again, on all that stuff. And we'll, and because we are all Muslims and will do things very well without the interference of those Hindus and all that stuff. And the Hindus probably said, the heck with you don't want to be with us, fine. I mean, and of course it was a terrible time in history. As a matter of fact, not enough literature has been written about the disaster that happened when they divided the country like this, and Hindus had to move out of what we would become Pakistan into India, and vice versa. Some estimates, like in the millions of people died. Terrible, but somehow not documented enough as a disaster that happened. It ended up being this, and the Muslims said that we will live happily ever after because we are all good Muslims. And they started on this situation since 1947. Let me leave that story for now, and we'll see what happens with and how it develops into becoming a conflict, even though it started with supposedly a happy start. I mean, it was one conflict that ended, right? So the stage of this, we are not explaining the conflict of why India and Pakistan divided, but that in itself was a conflict reached an outcome which was separation of India into Pakistan, the two sides of Pakistan, a federal state, east and west, and the India in the middle between them. And of course, when you think of geography, Alaska is a state of the United States, one of the 50 states, right? Is it geographically connected to any of the states? No, it's not. It's separated by Canada. But still, it is part of the state. So it wasn't a new thing to think that I'm going to have a state that has two parts separated geographically. And that's what they did. Now, we'll come to it and to understand what happened with them from 47 until 71. That will be what we will focus on. But the other conflict, I said I want to do this and also want to do an interpersonal conflict. The interpersonal conflict is between, just say, a husband and a wife. And let's say in a society that is a more traditional society, not traditional like the woman cannot get out or whatever, but not necessarily a Western society. And they both work, the husband and the wife. Both are middle-class, educated people. And they have one child, goes to school, little child. The husband works in a company, like a private company that makes profit every now and then. Sometimes they get some bonus. And the wife works in some government job. And they have one car. And they are not that rich. They cannot afford to buy a second car. And because the husband's job is far away and there are no transportation to get him to his job, and he has to be in his job earlier than when the wife has to leave him with the child. So he takes the car in the morning and he goes to his job. And the wife takes the bus to go to drop her child and then go on to her job, finishes her work, picks up the child from school, come back home. And then she has to take care of all the chores in the house and so on. And the husband has big ambition. He wants to run for a political office in the local elections in their city or town. And he believes that people know him, people love him, people appreciate him, and he has a big chance of winning. So what he decided to run for the upcoming elections in 2-3 months. But he has one problem. The house they live in is really run down, especially from the outside. It looks terrible. Everybody passes by this house will say, what an ugly scene in this city. Or to the point that his opponents in the elections are making fun of how his house looks like. And the kind of propaganda they have against him is something like, if he wins, he will make the whole city look like his house. So he's very embarrassed by the situation of his house, and he knows it is a weak point in his campaign. One day he comes to his wife, and he is so happy. And he runs in the house, honey, honey, where are you? Yes, what happened? What happened? I said, great news. We got our bonus for the year, and this year it is so high. We got $10,000. And they are jumping, Mabruk, Habibi, congratulations, Habibi, or whatever it is. And they are just like jumping up and down, so happy. And then, so she said, finally now we can buy a second car. Yeah. Okay. And he said, no. He said no. Why did he say no, Hero?
Of course, we need to paint the house.
Okay. Of course we need to. Obviously. Yeah. You should see Hero. Can you stand up here? If you don't mind. Do you mind? Yeah, no. I want to just stand up and face people. Okay, just face the audience and say what you said now. What's supposed to happen with the money?
Yeah, we need to paint the house.
It's great. Okay. You see the expression? Okay. All right. So, who wants to be the wife? Anybody want? Wait. We're just starting this. Okay. We just see time. Okay. We'll finish in a minute, but I would like one of the women to come and volunteer for a second. Anyone? Yes. Okay. Now let's say change. You are Japanese also, right? So that's for the sake of diversity. If you allow, are you Japanese too? No. Okay. Oh, she already had her hand up. So yeah, come in. Yes. That's Angel. All right. So you're hero and angel. Okay, no, stand there. Come. You never know what will happen. All right. So actually, look at her now and say to. So you said that. So we have the things. You already finished the jumping. So tell him now what you need to do.
Huh?
What do you need to do with the money?
Yay! So we can now buy a new car.
No. We need to paint the house.
Why?
No, we need to win the election.
Why? Why I need a new car? I mean, I'm doing all the household, everything. So I need a new car.
No, this is my bonus. I got this bonus.
All right. Oh, guys. Okay. This is getting hot. All right. Unfortunately, I have to stop, so that will be episode 1. And you have to come back tomorrow for episode 2. And of course, what we're doing is we're going to use this along with the Pakistan, Bangladesh, and we will see how we use this analysis. Very briefly, I just want you to start to think, when you think of this model of analysis, you can start it from anywhere when you start the analysis, but let's say you start from number 4, the parties in a conflict. And when you think from number 4, the parties, and you start to analyze the position, interest, and sources of conflict. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow, huh? First thing, both of you. Yeah, really. Really good. This is going to be hot tomorrow. All right. When you think of the parties in a conflict, whether it is the husband and the wife, and of course there are secondary parties and others, and when you think of Pakistan, Bangladesh, as I explained the story, you realize that there are other parties, but the core parties, the primary parties are the husband and the wife here. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the other one. They always in a conflict have a position in the husband and the wife. As you can see, they already the position established. Car, paint, right? But those positions typically have underlying them interest. If you ask the wife and the husband, why do you want the car? Why do you want the paint? Then they will recognize that there is something it will achieve for them. It will achieve, he said, I want to win the election, or I want comfort, or I want to be more efficient with my life and my child. There are interests that are being achieved because of buying the car or painting the house, right? And then from an academic point of view, we need to understand what are the causes, sources of conflict, which will take us to one of the theories you'll be studying, the basic human needs theory, which I'll be discussing tomorrow. For me, when I think of from number 4 to number 1, this is the rational side of a conflict, the logical side. That is like, what do I want? And why is it important for me? And what is causing the conflict? This is the rational side. But that's not the whole story. Because from the rational side, you already saw Hero and Angela. How do you describe their feelings that you saw quickly in this half a minute? Are they happy? What is a good description of their feelings? Frustrated and perhaps a little bit of anger. And those feelings will result definitely in some form of behavior. For me, from number 4, you go to 5 and 6, this is the emotional behavior element of the conflict. And I cannot understand this side and what will happen in it if I don't understand this side as well. And we will see, of course, with Bangladesh and Pakistan, the same thing. We'll see how the emotions and feelings developed and how they shaped, how they dealt with the logical and rational side of the conflict, and then with what intervention happens and so on. And in explaining that, we'll see how the culture and several factors in the context will influence what happens in the two stories and with what impact and what outcome will happen. We'll get more in details about it tomorrow. So now I just have to stop because you only have about 7 minutes for questions and answers. So if anyone has any question or comment, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, wait a minute. There are other hands. Raise your hand if you have. 3, 4. So you know yourself, right? Okay, remember your number. I'm not going to remember for you. Okay, you're going to be 1 and 2 in the next round if we get to it. 1, 2. But you know why I only stop at 4? Because whenever I did this and went to 6 and 7, usually I come to number 4 and then I say number 5 and the person forgets. And I don't, where's 5? 5 is not there. So I stop at 4 because you remember it easily, and then we repeat again from 1 and 2. Number 1, and for the sake of time, 20 seconds.
Okay, so as peace builder, so
Yeah.
coming to a conflict resolution, so how do we set aside all our biases, because we all have our biases,
Yeah.
and really represent the needs and interests of the people that we are representing?
Okay, this is a great question. But I can say that this is why you are here at UPeace, to learn. You are not going to learn this in 1 second. I cannot, this is a big issue. I'll touch on it during the week and when we get to the intervention, but to be honest, I will not give it all the story. This is just the foundation basic course. But as you go into your program and learn different things, and you're going to have classes dealing with how to deal with those issues, you're going to get deeper into it. But I appreciate that you highlighted it already, because yes, that's a critical piece. How do I control my emotions? But we will touch on it, but you will get more into it in other classes as well. Okay, good. Number 2.
Okay. While I was reading the
model. Yeah.
I got a little bit confused between sources and interests.
Good.
Because
Mañana.
Okay. It's
Mañana.
kind
Promise
of the
you.
same.
Like, I'll get in details about it.
An interest can be a source of a conflict.
Mañana.
Okay.
Promise you. Promise. That's a very important piece. And if we don't understand it well, then the whole thing is confusing. Good point. But I promise, I have not gotten to that yet, so I will get to it. Number 3. Yep. Yeah.
It's about the third point, like when you said why conflict can be harmful and destructive.
Yeah.
Thanks. They can also have a peaceful impact. And you took the example of France and Germany, but the peaceful impact occurred like a while later. Do you actually have an example when like the peaceful impact occurs in the
Faster.
present time? Yeah.
Like, okay, let me think of it and come back tomorrow, promise. Just like I did with the definitions of culture, let me think. I just don't want to, it will take me time to think of a direct one, probably. Yes, good point. So what you're asking for is, do you have example of a conflict transformed faster than this? It did not take 40, 50 years, and it ended up being more peaceful and transformative. Beautiful. Sure, okay, I'll come back tomorrow with an example. Very good. Number 4.
Do these methodologies, like the Sipabio
Yeah.
approach, work when one of the parties or more have psychological problems?
Oh, how does this apply?
Yeah. Can you use the same methodologies when a party isn't going to be thinking in the same way as most people might?
Oh, I see. So if somebody has psychological, or may I add mental?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
or mental problems, can you still use this process?
Yeah.
You know what? This is really excellent also. I will say for the sake of analysis, yes, but it will stumble over, yes. The assumption here is you are dealing with rational parties. No matter how much they get into convincing themselves that they are the good guy and you are the bad guy and demonizing you, that's normal actually in conflicts. But what is not normal, if you are dealing with somebody who is not balanced emotionally or mentally to a point that any rational effort is not going to work with them. But then the question is, who decides that? Because as a matter of fact, it's possible in conflict that I say that the other party is crazy. And the other party will also call me crazy. So do we just run with one person's opinion about the other, or there should be an objective assessment to say, no, this person is not balanced enough to be able. And if this is the case, then no, now we need to move this whole discussion into therapy and mental health. And it cannot be dealt with in the context, but it has to be an objective assessment. Okay, excellent point, and shows me also that I appreciate that you are bringing it to a very critical piece, the psychological dimension and mental dimension, which happens often, and also it's more dynamic. Maybe somebody starts a conflict in a rational way, but the more abuse and more then it makes them so irrational. So what are you going to do with this? I mean, so yes, great point. Okay, and then number 1, right? You.
I just have some question about the fundamentals of peace and conflict study. Okay. So I'd like to ask the term inequality, for example.
Inequality?
Yeah, can it fix in? Because I found some gap between the 0.4 and 0.5. I think it's not only about economics, but it's the ability to assess into the important conversations which determine their lives.
Okay,
for example,
4 or 5? Can you tell me
interventions and empowerment. Because now
between adjustable intervention and empowerment.
Yeah. Okay. Like the small groups, they represent their own right within the country, but sometimes they have no the power to assess to come in the important meeting something. Good. I think they've been marginalized. That's why the conflict emerged.
Good. Actually, thank you for connecting the two. If I find a disempowered group, as I said that in the number 3, that we tend toward to think of collaborative approaches to conflict. Mediation, negotiations, but mediation and negotiation assume some equality between and the power between parties so that you can come up with a fair arrangement. But if there is a power gap, asymmetry of power between them, and one is very disadvantaged, then comes number 4, adjustable intervention. Then I cannot use an approach that will reinforce the disempowerment of one of them. Instead, I need to use an approach that will empower the weak person. Maybe I need to do advocacy for them. Maybe I need to seek support for them to be powerful enough in these negotiations. Maybe I need to stop totally being a mediator or try to be a mediator and to work on the streets and do demonstrations to ask for the right of that person or that group of people. Only then I adjust again and go back to mediation when I think that I balance the power. I'm so happy that you connected those 3 pieces together. Final point here.
Thank you. One of the fundamentals was like conflict are inevitable. Now, if we consider just the international level, if we take the example of Costa Rica or Switzerland, Costa Rica, no army, Switzerland always been like a neutral country. Can we say that there is a way of mitigate or prevent conflict at the international level if the government put in place certain structure?
Yes, and that's, I think that resembles what we said about the European Union, that yes, it happened. We have examples of this where international entities learned how to set mechanisms to solve the problems between them or conflicts as they emerge in a peaceful manner. That does not mean there are no conflicts.
European Union countries, some European Union countries, they are still in war. But countries like Switzerland have never been since the setting of the states as we know it nowadays. Right. So is certain structures put like by the government can actually prevent and mitigate even, you know, is it a possibility then to have like not have a conflict? So conflict are evitable.
But well, my argument, and we can disagree on it, conflicts continue to happen. But Switzerland, in the example you said, has been successful in finding mechanisms and setting structures to deal with conflicts in a peaceful manner rather than getting it in any violent form. Am I answering the question? Discuss more. And you know, my office hours from 2 to 3. If you want to come and discuss it more, we can do it. And then if we think there's something valuable to bring to the group, we can come back and share it here. We can do that. What's your name? Federica. Okay. So you're welcome to come and discuss more. On time today. Okay, 9:55. Thank you guys so much. So you will be in your seminar at 10:15. I just want to alert you, the exercise you were given today, you'll be given today, assumed that we have gone a little bit farther in the analysis. So I will be okay that when you do the exercise, that you will just be taking elements of this, what you have understood so far from your reading, but I still going to work, but I know that it will be even better tomorrow when you understand more of the details of how to do analysis. Thank you, muchas gracias. Hasta mañana.